So, hello, Dr. Ray. How are you?
Good morning, Jian Zhu. I'm doing very well. Happy to be with you today. I look forward to a day we can meet again. Yeah, sure. It's been almost a 25-year adventure for me in Christian higher education. Jane, it all started from my vision in the pastoral ministry of the church. While I was completing my Doctor of Ministry degree, I really received a call from Dallas, Texas, to be a dean and eventually president of Dallas Christian College back in the early 90s. And I spent 8 years at Dallas Christian College, both as president and as dean, and really grew to love the potential of Christian higher education, transforming young people into Christian leaders, both locally and globally. At the time, I was not involved with any connections in China, but being a mission major as an undergraduate has always fostered a global vision for me. The second phase of that came at Lincoln Christian University in '98, where I spent 16 years as the president of the university, of which we connected in the latter half of my presidency there. So that whole experience convinced me that ministry and education go hand in hand. And so I was very much motivated to do that. So we saw lots of programs started and launched at Lincoln. One of them was the China Institute, which really was where you and I connected, and really we're inviting students from China to come to Lincoln and for many of our faculty to travel to China. So that relationship was a timely, strategic, and I think part of God's call to all of us to shorten the distance between China and the U.S. with the gospel.
Very well. So you and I went to China quite a few times, and very interesting observations and contacts. And what did you see, and what are your thoughts?
You know, if I recall correctly, Jane, and I'd need an hour to tell the story, but the first impression was, wow. China was at the time an amazing place of development, growth, expansion, economic impact, political power. And so the first word was wow. In America, that means that's amazing. Secondly, I found the Christians in China incredibly motivated to grow in their faith, to make a difference in China in particular, highly motivated to connect with America as a resource and as a tool and as a partnership, part of which fostered, I think, your vision. I found them very receptive to Western ideas that are not just Christian, but they're Christian ideas in the West. And yet, I think, try to have a critical analysis of sometimes the way things are done in the West aren't the best, then or now. But I was enthused by the explosion of the receptivity of the good news of Jesus Christ in China. It's like one of the fastest growing, the largest Christian nations in the world. And the only regret I had in all of that is I found out about it so late in life. Wish I'd known sooner. And thank God that your timing was what it was. And so I immediately became selfish about what I saw there and said, I want the Lincoln Christian University to be a part of that. We needed to have a place in China. You were the connection. The timing was perfect. And so to this day, I hold a high regard for you and your ministry and the opportunity that came as a result of that. And extremely fond of China as a nation and what God has and continue to do there.
Yeah, so, for example, you visited Beijing, certainly. You visited so-called Chinese Christian Jerusalem, Wenzhou.
Yeah, I do recall that, and that's one of those moments from missiology that you realize the power of the gospel destroys geographic distances and philosophical contradictions. And that's when I said, the East and the West meet at the foot of the cross. I have not spent as much time in the last 5 or 6 years unpacking Chinese structures and issues going on. I can tell you this, in the West, in the US, I think there are a lot of Christians who are saying that God is allowing a lot of things in the structure of the Western church to collapse. Our place in the political system in the West is up for grabs. It has historically been very much a part of the American system. It may or may not be. And frankly, my experience in China was one that I've reminded American Christians, you don't have to have a Christian government to be a Christian. Look at China, the largest, fastest growing place in the world for Christians living under the Chinese regime. And for those that know church history, we are reminded that every time in history, the church actually thrives under persecution more than it does when it's being accommodated by the culture. America is a good case in point. The church in the Western civilization, in America in particular, is in disarray. It's really trying to reconfigure who it is and how it interacts with Western culture. And it's been clinging to the American system to have a way in the world. And I think we're going to have to release that and see what God wants to reinvent in America. In the meantime, as far as I know, Chinese Christians have been able to thrive, to grow, to carry out the Great Commission, to be evangelistic, to have scriptures. Some of the things that they're lacking might be the vision of a Christian university in China, where that accelerates the impact on a culture. And so I think God is purging America of some really bad habits, if I may say. And it may take 10 or 20 years to figure out what the church in America will look like. I think it'll be healthier, stronger, and more aligned with God, even if the political system continues to go left and liberal and off the edge. I'm hoping that China will not impose even more restrictions on religious freedom, because they've had just enough to be an amazing, dynamic place for the gospel. So I don't have a lot of predictive capacities. I'm just hoping maybe Chinese Christians can show the Western church how to thrive, whether you have accommodation from the political structure or not.
So one time I asked you,
yeah, let's agree to this fact that I have the same Bible that you have. You have the same Bible that your friends have in China. We have the same Bible. And what is a quandary is how we can all have the same Bible with so many different interpretations, right? The Bible is the basis for unity. The interpretations are the basis for confusion and division. So my final premise is there will always be division because people are always interpreting the same Bible differently. So the only hope of overcoming division is the biblical worldview, which might be this, or the Christian worldview, We can agree that the Bible teaches there is a God, that he is holy, that he is involved in the world, that he provided his son for redemption, that he resurrected that son from the grave, that he rose again and is seated at the right hand of the Father. It's almost like if you read the Nicene or Apostolic Creed, they are major theological truths. But you notice they're not attached to any one scripture. There's a reason for that. We have to step up one step higher than Bible passages to agree. Because I might read something about the nature of God in the Bible, and you read the same thing, and we come away with a different interpretation. So we're better off agreeing on broad, sweeping worldview concepts. For example, one that I use in my current job is one of the 5 distinctives of Christianity is that we believe in a transcendent God. We believe there's a God who's in charge of the universe. That's a big sweeping truth. But we also read passages in the Bible where God is very minutely involved in details of people's lives. Yours, Moses' life, Jonathan's life, David's life, Saul's life, all these specific examples. And we may disagree what he's doing with you, Jane, versus what I think he's doing with me, but we would agree there is a God who is transcendent, that who's in charge of the universe. And I surrender to that. We can have unity about that. I don't have hope of having unity over minuscule interpretations of the Bible. Nobody does anymore. But what's happened in America, we built denominations around interpretations, right? That would be a bad move for the Chinese church. Building denominations around interpretations, because right now, 250 years later, the denominations in America are collapsing. And Christians aren't debating between Baptists and Presbyterian anymore. Baptist pastors and Presbyterian pastors are saying, we better find something in common and try to save America and skip fighting each other. Right? So how can you avoid division? You won't, number one. It's unavoidable because people interpret differently. But you can learn from American history, church history, which is we did the interpretations, we built denominations, we fought each other. And while we were fighting each other about our personal interpretations, American culture was falling apart. We were fighting the wrong enemy. Christians need to find what they have in common and stay there. Easy for me to say that. I'm a whopping 63 years old. I know better than I did 30 years ago.
Wonderful. So,
yeah, that's a sticky question. And I think I couldn't hear everything. I assume you mentioned the 2020 election in the US. Almost never in history have Christians been in the majority. Almost never. And I'm not sure they were ever a majority of America, but they had majority influence because the Christian worldview, the biblical worldview, was infused into some of our historic documents. Declaration of Independence, Gettysburg Address, Constitution. There are really Judeo-Christian values that are baked into those documents. Whether that's true or not doesn't mean we're right back to interpretation. How you and I interpret the Constitution of the U.S. and the amendments is different than the modern day man. They're interpreting it differently, aren't they? Which is why we're having this battle. So what may have once been may now have been lost, not because the document says anything differently, just like the Bible, but people are interpreting it differently. My hunch is the current and future interpretation will win out. It will eventually, probably, because in a democracy, majority rules. Now, I don't really know what the majority is, but it feels like the left liberal side is a majority screaming voice. If anything, the conservative Christian worldview could be a majority of U.S. population, but some are calling them the silent majority. They're not stepping up and saying something or voting or being active for a lot of reasons. So I really don't know who has the majority, but here's what you do have in a democracy, in a republic. It's run by the majority. And if the majority of this country is an anti-Christian worldview, that's where it will go. And we may be in the pains of that transition occurring, which makes me fast forward to say, I don't need a Christian republic, a Christian nation, a Christian system to be a Christian. Here's how I know. China's been that way forever. So we should be learning something from Chinese church. It said, look at us. We're growing. We're faithful. We are serving Christ. We are growing. We're evangelistic. We're the largest Christian nation in the world under a communist regime. That doesn't make any sense, Jane. And so I want America to have what it's lost, but I'm not banking on it. I'm voting for a system that I think that would retain that the best of a Christian vision, but I don't know if it will make it. There's some things I don't like about what's happening in the political system. I'm not even going to go there. But my faith is in Jesus Christ. And if I'm the last Christian in America, I'm fine with that. I don't need any help from anybody to be a Christian other than the Bible, the Spirit, other Christians. And if our political system collapses around us in every way, I'm still going to be a follower of Jesus Christ. Would I like it the other way around? I certainly would. And I really think it's too soon to say, no matter which way this election goes, what the ongoing impact will be. Clearly, we have significant, wealthy, influential Christians in the right places. They are not leading the universities in America. So all the forthcoming generations will not get a Christian worldview for the most part. And that says a lot about how the masses are thinking. So, that doesn't maybe answer everything you're asking, but sometimes I think Christians put too much weight on a political system. Jesus didn't really have a lot to say about the Roman Empire. And I'm sure he wasn't very happy with the Roman Empire.